All right, so today we're going to be talking all about strawberries, how to grow strawberries. I'm hoping that after you leave this little classroom here today or this online format that you'll all be a little more confident in getting your hands dirty and trying to get some strawberries planted, and maybe learn a thing or two. Pardon me while I fumble a little here. So the cool thing about strawberries is they're native to our northern hemisphere, which is something that makes them really easy to grow in our climate. You're looking at a potential of 1 to 2 pounds of harvest per plant. So if you're looking to buy plants to feed your whole family for the whole summer, you might want to think about how those numbers are going to convert over. They're very versatile, so you can, no matter what kind of ground you're working with, you can figure out how to sneak some strawberries in there. From ground covering, native options to row crops, raised beds, hanging baskets, or just pots. Another really cool thing about the strawberries is they're part of the rose family, which is where they get their incredible fragrance and color from. And some little nerdy fun fact about them is the actual berry that we eat isn't considered a true berry. The little tiny small bumps on the berry is the true berry, and the fruit, that big fruit, is just an accessory to the berry to help them get to where they need to go. So I like this little picture I included here of the strawberry plant, just in case you've never got to see the crown of a strawberry. Their roots are incredibly shallow, and a lot of their growing comes from the crown. And another great thing about this graph here is it shows you the just right level to plant them. You don't want to plant them too deep or they'll rot, and you don't want to plant them too shallow or they'll be upset with you. So picking a variety, where should I even start? 2 things to consider before you even start thinking about it is, would you like a June bearing or an ever bearing? For consideration today, we'll be grouping ever bearing and day neutral into the same category because they basically do the same thing for our environment. They provide a continuous crop throughout the whole summer. They don't care about day length, they just care about the temperature. So as long as it's warm outside and we haven't switched to our fall and winter, they'll keep producing berries. The June bearing is just one large done crop in the spring, just a one and done. That's really great if you plan on cooking with them, freezing with them, preserving with them. That way you don't have to spend too much time thinking about them. It's just get it done. However, the everbearing and the day neutral is nice if you've got little kids around that like to pick every day or so. Some more facts about everbearing and day neutrals. Their fruit tends to be a little smaller than June bearing. They tend to have a little bit smaller yields overall. However, their seasons are much longer. While they also have great quality for flavor and firmness, they tend to have fewer runners than the June bearings. They tend to be bred for less running. And we'll talk more about runners in a little while. And this fewer amount of runners make them better for container gardening, like potting. Here's some very popular varieties. The Albions are nice, firm, large, and sweet ones. I believe they're bred from the Cabrillos. So, the Seascapes, they're a little bit smaller. However, if you've tasted around, I find that people who really like Seascapes are really, really, really like Seascapes. The varieties with a little star asterisk next to them are varieties that we currently have in stock at Shonnard's. The other 3 there are ones that we regularly try to have in. One I got pretty excited about and went home with me last year is the Hawaiian berry, there at the bottom. The berries are actually really white and they're supposed to taste a little bit like pineapple. I didn't get much of a crop off mine last year, but this year, I'm looking forward to that. June bearing, because it's a one and done, they really put all their energy into that one crop. They're very large concentrated harvests that tend to be incredibly sweet and flavorful, and the berries tend to be pretty dang large. Your first year that you plant, you can expect to not get too much fruit and let your runners go to produce daughter plants, who will then produce more productive berries for you next year. They're all around great flavor, and as I said, great for jams and freezing for production. Here are some varieties we currently have in with the asterisk, and the hood, Benton, and Tillamook ones we like to have in. We have bare root strawberries available now at Shonnard's. That's an older picture, but that's kind of what they look like. I've got a newer one right there. These are our current strawberries. And this is the different forms, you'll see them here. So first, I'd like to recommend buying the bare root bundles of 10, just because this is your best value, the best bang for your buck. We've literally just slapped 10 crowns, 10 strawberries into one 1-gallon pot, which is the picture in the top left. So it looks like one plant in there, but there's actually 10 in there, and they need to be planted as soon as possible. Right now we have those in Mary's Peak, Albion, Seascape, and Cabrillo. Mary's Peak being the only June bearing, which is what the asterisk stands for on this slide. The next type is these planted flats on the right hand side. There are 25 of them in there for $29.99. We've put the effort and the time into these ones to plant them in like potting soil so that they'll survive in these containers for us for the whole summer. So we've added a little bit more of a price on the price tag, which is what makes the bare root bundles better value. And then we also like to carry in these single 4-inch pots. This is one plant in one pot. This is really nice because you can get different varieties. We often carry more specific and bigger variety of varieties. Right now you can see Hanoi, Sequoia, Eversweet, Quinault, and as well as Seascape in the 4-inch. These are little plants that we bought from like Peoria to come in to live in their little 4-inch pots. So a couple of things to think about before you start getting dirty and planting. Avoid planting the crown. As we talked about in the picture, you really want that just right space, not too deep, not too shallow. It's a good idea to avoid curling the roots into the hole. This makes the plant think that it's crowded and doesn't have much room to grow. We often will recommend trimming some of the roots if you need to make it fit where it's got to go. Yeah.
Do you need to spread them out, or can you just put like when they come out of their, or when in their bare root state, they're kind of together? Should you spread them out, or can you just plant them like that?
You can just plant them like that. At that time, you can take a good look at those roots, trim off anything that looks noticeably dead, and trim off the tips of the roots will encourage more roots to start growing. And my little soapbox I always like to throw in here is always practice good crop rotation. So the lifespan of a strawberry is only about 3 years. It'll live longer than that, but its productive lifespan is only about 3 years. At that point, we recommend pulling them out, getting something new in there. And then I also like to recommend thinking about planting something else in that spot. If you're doing raised beds or in your native ground planting, think about planting leafy vegetables or something there for that time being for the next 3 years is what I recommend for crop rotation. I'll talk a little bit more about crop rotation in a little bit. But yeah, the strawberries share a lot of disease with tomatoes and roses. So just plan not to plant tomatoes and solanaceas, peppers in that area for 3 years, or putting more strawberries. If you're doing it in a pot, you can always take out all your soil, put more soil in. If you're in a raised bed, I just recommend planting leafy greens in that spot for a little bit, or cover crops, just to help any lingering soil-borne illnesses that are specifically attacking that family of plant to kind of dissipate and go away. So here's the breakdown of the strawberry plant again, a little deeper or closer up. Again, that just right level really is important with the crown of the strawberries. And here I'd like to talk a little bit too, point out the runner. So this is what you're going to see your strawberry plant just naturally doing over the summer, is putting off these runners, which is just like a really long arm or root where it's trying to put more of these daughter plants off. With everbearings, you want to make sure to trim those runners off as you see them. With June bearings, they're likely have already fruited, so you can let them spread their daughters.
And can you save those as your new plants?
You can.
So trim all the runners off of everberry.
Yes, so the plant will kind of make a decision whether it wants to produce offspring or whether it wants to produce fruit. So you kind of have to make that choice. If you let your runners go to create daughter plants, it's probably going to be producing less fruit for you. So if you cut those daughters off, you're allowing the plant to think solely about fruiting.
So we have strawberries planted, and it's probably been 2 or 3 years since we planted the main, 6 or 12 or whatever we had. But we have lots of runners. And we want to switch to raised beds. Can we take some of those runners and replant?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
but you wouldn't replant the main.
I wouldn't, no. If it's
Okay.
been 2 or 3 years, I'd just let the main ones
Bill.
go and take their daughters
Okay,
for the
okay.
future production.
Okay.
Which sounds quite morbid, but.
Yeah, okay.
So, I was given strawberry plants, and before I knew you were having this, I just planted them in the spot there, so they're now planted, so I have no idea how old they are. So I'm gonna I should just let them go, and if they make the runners, I should collect the runners and maybe get rid of the plants.
That's, yeah,
Or
you
maybe after this season, just to see
Yeah.
if they produce fruit, I don't even know what kind they are.
could let them go this season, fertilize them real good, see what kind of fruit and production they give you. And then next year, if you weren't happy with the production, you could just let the daughters go, so you can have a whole new set of
Because
plants. Unless you don't like the fruit and want a whole
I
new.
don't even know if we're gonna get, because we had a very big surprise.
Are we talking strictly the June type, or are we saying that we can keep the runners even from the everbearing and day neutral ones?
Okay, I just got a question on my computer. I didn't realize I had the volume going through, so you were very quiet. Can you repeat your question?
Yes. So we just had this discussion about saving the daughters, but before you were talking on the everbearing, you were saying trim off all the runners.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about saving daughters of the June berries only, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless you wanted to make the option to forego your fruit to save daughters for future production on your everbearings.
Oh, gotcha. So if you save those, you're not getting the fruit. Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And just so you know, I'm actually gonna probably put this on mute. So if you have another question, or if anyone else on the computer has a question, will you pop it in the chat box?
On an everberry, you could cut off the runner. Help more fruit production, but you could also save that runner in a little pot for your next season.
Yes.
They're not. Like infertile.
No, they shouldn't be. No, no. All right, let's keep going here. So site selection, when you're thinking about where to plant your strawberries, keep in mind that they love full sun. This means at least 6 hours of direct light. If they're gonna get a little shade in the evening, that's not gonna ruin their production as long as they can hit that full 6 hours of light. Irrigation, they're gonna need watering through the summer, especially in our Willamette Valley. We don't get any summer watering, so they need to be provided water from you, whether that be irrigation, or mechanical irrigation or watering by hand. I say avoid frost pockets here, and that's mainly for if you're planting in the ground, in the native ground. Cold air kind of settles in the low points of our lawns and on our properties. So if you plant things in a specifically low area, it's got a higher chance of being trapped in this frost pocket. And so you can help protect it by moving it, maybe it's 3 feet over or something where it starts, the gradient starts going a little higher, or creating even a mound, which addresses drainage issues as well. So here in the Willamette Valley, we get so much rain in the winter, so much rain. So these low frost points or low drainage points can often become oversaturated, and that'll kill your strawberry faster than anything. So I recommend doing this mounding of your soil, and that will help create drainage. And it'll help lift the plant up to stop it from hitting a low spot where the oversaturation begins. Again, practice good crop rotation, avoid 3 years of Solanaceae and Rosaceae families, and that's just the fancy words for Solanaceae, fancy words for your tomato family, your nightshade family, your peppers.
Do you want me to save my questions for later or?
Go for it.
Because I didn't come to this class earlier. I planted my strawberries this year, 10 days ago, in a place where there were tomatoes last year. Last time. So, but I didn't know how they're related to tomatoes. Should I take them out and put them somewhere else?
Did you see any previous issues with your tomatoes when you planted there?
No.
I'd say you're probably fine. So it's just like a great preventative measure and something to always think about when you're in your garden. If you just plant tomatoes in that one spot for the next 10 years, you're going to end up causing some issues in your soil.
Yeah.
And whatnot. So it's kind of that idea of preventing anything like that from being able to happen. And the roses and tomatoes share a lot of those diseases and issues. So it's just a good way to prevent it. So if you're not seeing any issue currently, I don't expect that you're going to see an issue, but
Okay.
you'll be fine. Just maybe when you pull your strawberries out in 3 years, maybe think about not putting tomatoes in the spot again.
Got
Mounding helps with drainage. Everbearing and day neutral plants, you can plant a little closer together at 12 to 15 inches apart. June bearing, you want to give them a little bit more space to allow those daughter plants to start filling in. So strawberries are generally very hungry, very thirsty little plants. They make huge berries for just little, they got 3 inches of root space underneath the soil for the most part. They really don't use a lot of soil at all. So to help with this, you want to help increase the organic material in your soil, which will help increase the nutrition available, drainage, aeration, as well as water retention. They love well-draining soil. They love to be moist, but not saturated. And I know these are kind of like opposite things to each other, but there's that happy little in between. Another thing to think about is they prefer soil pHs 5.3 to 6.5. It's a little slightly acidic leaning. This helps optimize nutrient uses when it's in that pH zone. It has a much more optimal life. This is something to think about if you plan on planting them near other plants that don't enjoy the same kind of soil, like your gardenias or your daphnes or something. They like more sweet soil. Or sorry, gardenias like it acidic too. Daphnes like it sweet. Lilacs like it sweet. Here's some tips and tricks for planting in the ground. Again, our native soils are very slightly acidic leaning, but very rich in clay content. This makes it hard to access nutrients in the soil for the plants, which is why I recommend using really organic rich material, which will help break up that clay. Do your soil research of your area's history. Think about possible contaminants that might be in this area if you're planting in the ground. I know in Corvallis is pretty known for like their old oil wells breaking in their front lawns and stuff around Corvallis. So just be sure what you're using is like healthy and you're not going to be poisoning yourself or your pollinators that come visit your flowers. So just think about that as you're planting. You can get specific soil makeup testing kits. We sell testing kits, but OSU also does soil testing. You have to pay, I believe, to access those. And one of my favorite free tools available to the whole public is this NRSCS soil survey. And I think I can zoom in here. This is the Shonnard's Garden Center, our soil survey for our area here. This is what it's going to look like when you look up your house. And to the left, it tells you the soil makeups in those different areas. And if you were to click on the soil makeup, it would tell you more specific information about that specific soil of your area. So that's just really informative tool to know a little bit more about the soil you're working with in your home.
Could you go back to that, to the soil survey, what the website is?
Yeah. I also added a little blurb in here. If you're interested in learning more about soil, I'd recommend going to our YouTube page. We did a really awesome class there that's uploaded there. From James Cassidy, OSU soil science teacher. So he talks a lot about soil and there's a lot to learn in that 40 minutes and he just jam packs it in there, but he does it in a really relatable, really easy to understand way. The issue with that recording is we had some recording issues, so the audio on it is a little funky. But if you pop up the like closed captioning, the subtitles for it, it makes it a lot more easy to understand and follow along.
You've been gardening in your backyard for 30 years. How reliable is this NRSCS survey? Because they don't know what you've done to your garden.
They don't know what you've done to your garden. They don't know what you've added. It'll just, and a lot of the soils are, the surveys are done from like 2007 or beforehand. But so keep in mind what you've been adding to your soil, but it still gives you a great idea of maybe what's going on below the surface level of the soil you've been able to work with. My last point there, I think, was just mulch. Sorry. Make you all motion sick for a second. So strawberries, they need that amending for drainage and nutrients, especially in our native soils. Consider mounding to increase the drainage. and pair your native soil with an amendment at planting. So a lot of people talk a lot of trash on our native soil because it seems useless to us and it's hard to work with. But when you add that organic material, it allows the plant to fully access all the great things that are in our soil, which it's packed full of nutrients and water. It's just hard to access for the plants. It's trapped in the clay. All right. Bear with me one more second. So planting in raised beds. So raised beds, you tend to have a lot greater drainage. So you kind of can struggle with moisture retention, especially near the top, or water consistency, because it can be oversaturated near the bottom. They can struggle with nutrients. For helping both of these issues, I recommend using organic rich planting composts. I also recommend keeping track of your additives and your amendments. Same with your native soils too. That way you can, when you've been doing it for 10 years in that same spot, you can take a look back and reference how you've been working with it. And use a nutrient dense mulch like planting compost at planting, as well as mulching. So when I say mulch, I can be referring to it as like a verb of physically putting the soil on top of soil amendments on top of the soil. So you got your soil level that you planted your strawberry in, you got your little strawberry poking out. Mulching can be referred to the physical act of putting soil on top of that soil to kind of help blanket the plant in. It can also be referred to as like the noun of what you're using to mulch. You know, it can get a little confusing, but so.
Should the mulch be away from the ground?
Yes, so the general rule of thumb is about 2 inches away from the plant. Strawberries are a little smaller, so I would go 1 inch away from the crown of the strawberry as to not choke it out. I'll talk a little bit more about that too at the planting.
What's the difference between like Harvest Supreme and more?
So Harvest Supreme is really great. It's got a lot of really great chunky wood products in it, as well as 15% chicken manure in it. So you get the best of both worlds on that. The worm grow is just worm castings, which is just really nutrient dense.
We really only need to worry about like the top 6 inches, huh?
Yep. Yeah, especially with strawberries. Container planting, I wanted to throw this in here because this is what I do. I do a lot of mine in pots. And my thought line on that is the plants rely solely on what you give them. They can't reach to the soil around them like they can in raised beds or native soils. They're literally confined to what you give them. So they struggle for consistent nutrient and moisture more than any other plant in a raised bed or in the ground. So you will need to use a potting soil. And I also recommend when you're doing very hungry plants like strawberries or tomatoes to also use a nutrient-rich mulch as well, like a planting compost. I like to use this planting compost or this Harvest Supreme on the right side paired with my potting soils on the left side for the growing medium. And then I'll use just the planting compost on top as the mulch.
Question about pots.
Yeah.
The next year when you want to add compost, is there a certain formula, like a third or to the old soil? Should you reuse the old soil and just add compost?
So I when I'm just mulching off of a plant that I've had for like, say I've had my strawberry for 2 years and I want to get another year out of it. Most of the time the soil will compact down around the plant, so it'll be naturally missing kind of some soil. Sometimes I'll go in and I'll just take some fistfuls off the top to create some room for added mulch on top. Again, just like the 2 inches. And once you get that all scraped off, loose soil off the top, that's a good time to put in granular fertilizer too. And then your mulch on top, so it helps hold it in. Does that answer your question? All right, so caring for your strawberries, a three-pronged approach, heavy on the first two. So watering and fertilizing. Watering as strawberries can be very difficult. They really only occupy the first 3 inches, which mean they're gonna dry out really fast compared to other things in your garden. And they like it moist and not soggy, which is, again, can be kind of difficult in our gardens. They require a lot of water to produce these big berries. So you should never let their root system dry out totally. Again, the roots are only at a 3-inch level, so if you needed to stick your finger in there to kind of give you a better idea what moisture level you're working with, that'll be totally fine, and it'll give you a great idea. I recommend keeping your moisture very consistent during the growing season. The fluctuation might kind of start to stress out the plant, especially on your everbearings when you need to keep them happier for longer. And container strawberries in pots will require more frequent and deep waterings. Keep your water off the crown and the foliage. If you get the crown overly wet, it can rot. It can cause diseases and other fungal issues if you water your foliage as well. I recommend watering at the base of the plant, unlike this picture of me here. Oh, I just wanted to include this. This was back when we had raised beds back here to help do some visual gardening, and it was a lot of fun. I just posed for a picture here. I don't normally water things like this. When I'm watering, I like to take advantage of that really long handle there to really get at the base of the plant. When you're doing a general watering like this, it can help over the whole soil mass. It can help promote weeds because it increases the water availability in places that you don't want plants growing necessarily. So if you keep it localized to the root mass of your plant, it can help reduce your weeds. And powdery mildew. We struggle greatly with powdery mildew here in the Willamette Valley. Keep the water off your foliage and it will help reduce that a lot. So some fertilizing facts here for you. It's a good idea to fertilize your June bears after production, and this will help them get set on a great foot for the next year's season. Everbearing, they're gonna want multiple feedings. I recommend April, May, and June, and that'll help them produce for longer periods. Liquid fertilizers, there's a difference between liquid and granular, so I'm gonna go over that real quick. They're liquids, they're easy to use by the plant itself. It's readily taken up. It's got a quick release and a quick wear off. So it's really great for days like we're gonna have in the next couple days, our early spring, when it's just above that growing temperature just for a few days. And you really want to help it grow just a little bit. Things like garlic. Liquid fertilizing your garlic right now will really help push them. The granular fertilizers are very long lasting. I want to say about 3 months, and they're very consistent, slow release fertilizers. They're great for summer feedings and great for also just shoving in the hole at planting. Be careful what kind of fertilizers you're using when you're shoving them in the hole at planting, not to burn your plant when you're using things like Miracle-Gro. Our GB organic products that we carry, they're very easy on the plant, so you can put it right in the hole at planting, not worry about it. When you are fertilizing your strawberries, it's a good idea to keep the fertilizer off your crown for the same reasons as water. It will reduce your rotting. There's an up close picture of our liquid fertilizers here. I like to recommend using things like our fruit tree citrus, the tomato herb, and the bud and bloom, as well as the all-purpose. But the bud and bloom and the tomato, they're kind of geared a little bit more to allow for more flowering. The bud and bloom is geared specifically toward ornamentals, but it'll work on your strawberries too. You want them to continue flowering so that they'll continue fruiting.
Would the bud and bloom also work on roses because it's the same family?
And then I included this picture. We've got that all-purpose, which I would recommend over this organic high growth. The organic high growth really is just for green growth, which is better for things like houseplants or your leafy greens, because you don't want them to flower. So I believe what you're looking for on flowering products is a high middle number on the NPK, so which is these three little numbers down here. You can see these all have higher, oh, not that. They have your higher middle numbers, which is more towards flowering. And this high growth here has a 0 on that middle number, because it really is just for green growth. Harvesting and fruiting, ideally, all our baskets will look like that. So for all types of your strawberries, everbearing and June bearing, I'd recommend picking every few days to ensure the freshness, ripeness of your fruit and minimize any pest issues you might see. Of course, for June bearing, this time period will be much shorter and your everbearing will be much longer. Wash it before eating. Just a little common sense there, just because you never know what kind of animal visited your garden. Strawberries can hold for 1 to 2 days on the counter if you wanted 5 to 10 days in the refrigerator, 5 to 10 plus months in your freezer. The best yield you're going to see on your plants is a year after planting. But after 3 years, your production really starts to decrease. The lifespan is really starting to come to an end.
So in some places I've read to take the blooms off the first year.
That is not a bad idea, especially if you're willing to sacrifice your fruit or any possible fruit you might have. That way it can help it can focus that energy into its roots and into its green growth rather than its fruiting.
Does the picking stimulate more growth or is it sort of a finite amount?
I believe picking does stimulate new growth, and removing those unwanted daughters will too. So I would always recommend removing your daughters unless you're sacrificing your fruit for more daughter production. They say too, I thought I had it in here somewhere, we might still stumble upon it, but the best time to clip your runners is when they just start to produce little tiny leaves on the runner, because that stops it at the right period in its life cycle, that it doesn't cause too much disruption and it can just go right back to fruiting. So once that daughter plant has started to set roots, the mother plant has already kind of switched thought to, hey, I'd rather do daughters this year rather than fruit. So if you stay up on your daughter, you're running daughters.
So at first the rudder comes out and it's got like a little arrow at the beginning and then it starts to set leaves. So it's at that leaf set, not the initial coming out.
Yes. Yeah.
So you could do it too early as well.
I wouldn't say it would be too early. I mean,
But don't let it start.
past that, it's too late.
So it's better to cut the daughter, and if you were, like, for me, I don't know about my plants. Cut the daughter, could I then detach it from the main plant and plant it right there?
So if you're wanting to plant your daughters, I would say you're gonna sacrifice your berries for 1 year. So you're gonna let that daughter kind of establish a few roots. So after it sets off a couple of leaves, it'll start setting off roots.
Right.
That runner will try to root into your soil.
Right.
You can, once it's rooted into the soil, you can cut that runner from the mother and that'll be a a plant on its own.
But if I do that, then maybe the main plant won't really produce so much fruit.
Correct.
Okay. Boy, all the sacrifice. Oh, sorry. Okay.
So just a couple of thoughts about pruning. Do it while you're harvesting. Some things you can do then is removing your rotting or discarded fruit. Things that you don't want to continue ripening because it looks too funky and you're not gonna eat it later anyway. Just get rid of it. Remove the old dead leaves, remove your running daughters, and any unwanted daughters from your everbearings. Keep in mind if it's a June bearing and you want to keep your daughters, just leave them there. Oh, there it is. Best to remove as leaves begin, but before they root.
So this last year, I was in second year of production on my strawberry bed, and it was a wonderful year, a heavy producing year. My corgi was in there eating strawberries all the time. But then at the end of the season, I read some articles about a way of pruning was to mow your bed.
Yeah,
Have you heard that?
yeah, so
So I tried it. I'm not sure what's gonna happen. But
yeah, so the June bears, we actually recommend mowing after their production. You can see in that little dot there. The big thing about mowing your strawberries is to not go too low. You want to be at least that 2-inch to not cut into the crown. So it's the crown you want to protect and just mow the leaves off, and that's totally fine.
Do they benefit from the mow?
Everbearing, you can maybe mow them after the fall. So once they start going dormant, they're done producing berries and they start looking real scraggly. June bearers, you can do this right after production.
Well, is there a chance that the mother plant, it's done everbearing, being everbearing? Could they still send out a runner at that point and then you can capture that runner?
Yeah, after that 3 or 4 years.
No, I'm thinking even after like September.
Oh, after fruiting.
Yeah. Is it possible that
Yeah,
in warm days or months?
yeah, I'm actually thinking I believe my Hawaiian berry did produce a lot of runners there late in the season, kind of after I stopped looking at it.
Yeah. And ideally, you want to keep cutting those because you want the most energy going back to the mother plant.
Correct.
So we're just always cutting. Always.
Yeah. I got a little lackluster on mine last year, so I might have one growing in my lawn this year. And again, remove crowns after 3 or 4 years, just as they are starting to age out. They're starting to lose production. They're not going to be as thriving as you want them to be. They might look great still, they might look great, but they might not produce as much as you want them to. Avoid planting where tomato and rose families have been in the last 3 years. That's just an idea of good crop rotation. I'm doing starting a vegetable garden next week class, and I'm going to be talking a lot more about vegetable families and crop rotation. So if you wanted to be bored a little more by me, then
Were there other things in the vegetable garden in the rose family?
I'm trying to think right off my head. So yeah, it's potatoes are Solanaceae.
Potatoes are with the tomatoes.
Yeah, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I can't think of anything, but I'm sure there is. I want to say raspberries.
Potatoes like.
No,
Tomatoes,
potatoes, peppers, don't.
Okay.
I believe a raspberry is a rosaceae.
If you're just constantly putting strawberries in the same spot, and after 3 years, your production dies down and you take all the plants out and you revitalize the soil with lots of organic material and whatnot, is it a problem still to continue to use the same spot just for strawberry?
I would say it can be. So again, it's an idea of preventative measures. Plants take out different things from the soils at different rates at different levels. So strawberries are only operating in the first top 3. However, you know, your tomatoes and other things, brassicas, your Brussels sprouts and broccoli, they tend to have a lot larger root spans than just your strawberries. So your strawberries are going to eat what they're going to eat at their level, and they'll end up depleting that soil repeatedly of that same thing. If you're revitalizing every year, that'll help replenish the nutrients they're depleting. However, if they're depositing any disease or pests, another thing about pests is if you're planting in that same spot every year, your aphids, you know, or your slugs, that every year there's going to be strawberries here. Why would I want to look anywhere else?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Oh, once winter hits, you can reduce your feeding rate half to none. You really don't have to feed in the winter time. It really takes temperatures above like 55 degrees for things to start actively growing. So once the soil temperature has started hitting below that 50 degrees, things like to go to sleep. And prevention is always key. Good drainage, air circulation, and crop rotation are always really great words to have included into your garden. It's always easier to prevent something from happening than going back and trying to fix it. Although sometimes we don't have a choice with things like deer and aphids and slugs.
We get a lot of ants with our strawberries.
That's a great question. I actually want to do more research on that because it's not the first time I've heard that,
Yeah.
and I'm not entirely sure.
The
Do
only
they
thing-
cause damage?
Yeah,
Yeah.
They
They eat
they
the
eat the strawberries.
yeah, yeah. And so what we heard is to like put a bowl of the plant and put cinnamon around, the ants don't like the cinnamon, and then, you know, just so it doesn't get on the plant itself, but it's around the plant, so that.
That's a good idea.
Can you use crushed eggshells
For slugs, I don't know about ants.
for ants too? They might not want to. Maybe it would hurt them.
You can try it, but I think they're so tiny that they kind of
Yeah.
can maneuver around
Yeah.
a lot of those
Yeah.
things. A lot of things that can help prevent that too is your container gardening. I've heard people using things like gutters. And just having it up and off the ground can help
Yeah.
prevent a lot of your pest issues. So I really recommend using physical deterrents for things like birds and deer. Spinosad is a really great treatment for all things around the garden. Great things. The spotted wing Drosophila is often seen on strawberries, but not too often. Really, strawberries don't have a whole lot of pest issues. Past the slugs. Slugs are pretty much a guarantee. For that, I recommend Sluggo. The eggshells is really great. Also, we sell the hazelnut shells. I've heard really great things about hazelnut shells for slugs as well as cats. Cats don't like to touch the hazelnuts. I've heard that from customers, so it's really great. Prevention's always key. However, I made this really great Venn diagram I like to show people. This isn't always spot on, but it kind of gives you an idea of, like, if you're looking at symptoms, what you could possibly be looking at, because it's a good idea to figure out what's happening to your plant before you can treat what you're seeing. So if you're looking at pests, you're going to see a lot of things like tunnels, boring holes. Sometimes you'll see white fluff. You'll see webbing or the sticky dew, like the black, yeah. Environmental, you'll see legginess and reaching if it needs more sun. If it's overwatering or underwatering, you'll see either full browning of leaves or browning on the tips. And if it's disease, you'll see things like brown dead tissue, streaking through the tissue, melting of the plant, and or white powdering dusting on the plant. So this isn't spot on, but it gives you a good idea. Smelly soil, it's another thing I like to point out. Because we should all know what good soil smells like. It smells like nice dirt. If it smells bad, it's gonna smell like a dirty sink of dirty dishwater, and you'll know that the soil is bad. So it's normally good until it's bad. And that's basically all I have for all of that. I wanted to tell you all thank you again. If you have any more questions or anything, you can always feel free to email me or the garden as a total itself, the whole store. And our YouTube page is a really, really great place to be looking for information on all sorts of different things. All of these classes we've done, we've uploaded to our YouTube page in the past, so you can see fruit tree pruning by Darren. You can see the natives class is a really big one.
Can you get to those from the Shonnard site then to the YouTube, or you have to go to YouTube?
If you go to YouTube and search Shonnard, it'll bring up our page on there. I don't know if we have we should have a connection through our YouTube, our website if we don't. But yeah, and again, that soil science class by James Cassidy is on there too. All really, really, really great information. So if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to come into the store or give me a call or an email. I'm really happy to talk to people about growing their own food. So
Well, in a commercial strawberry field, you these wonderful blocks, black plastic squares or kind of rectangle things and the plants on top. What are they doing that for?
I'm not sure if I know entirely what you're talking about, but a lot of people will string black plastic over their raised beds, their garden beds to help warm the soil. Especially this time of year when our soil's still really cold, but the sun is starting to come out. That's a really great way to warm it up, to get it going, to get ready to plant warmer cropped seeds and whatnot.
So it's probably encased in that black plastic. To keep it more.
Yeah,
It's also makes it easier to cut the runners if you're trying to get rid of them.
yeah, exactly. Cut the runners, keep up on your weeding too. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
I have a few more specific thoughts, I think. Are you okay? You have time?
Yeah.
Okay, so I planted an entire garden in pots. So I have all this soil from last year that I want to revitalize. So I've been doing like a third compost to the old soil and mix it in. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's something I would do if you want to keep your soil too. That's another place you can think about, like crop rotation. Like if you're gonna use your old tomato soil, don't do tomato in that one again. Do your leafy vegetables in there.
Great.
It's just
That's what I need, because I'm not used to this pot planting. It's all new to me.
So, didn't want to sound silly, but, so do I put straw around the strawberries?
so.
I was kind of waiting to see if you were gonna say anything like.
The straw is the mulch. So you see people using straw in commercial beds and stuff like that, just for the price point. It doesn't really do.
My
It'll,
bed is like as big as this desk.
so it's worth investing in a nutrient rich mulch, like compost versus the straw, which they'll do the same thing. But the straw doesn't provide any nutrient benefits.
My problem with the compost is, well, I can just keep it covered. I have dogs who think it's just delightful.
Oh, yeah,
It smells so good.
yeah.
We have like baby gates around them right now, so, because we use chicken manure. When we first planted these, because I don't know anything about them, I just said, let's put them in the ground, because this is an enormous spot in the yard. And we moved everything and we amended the soil and did all that. But now we have to have, it smells so good, so the puppies are like, woo,
Yeah.
this is great place.
Especially
So-
when you put fertilizer in
I
too.
know, so like if I put the mulch, it's gonna also smell.
Yeah, yeah,
So, but you're thinking the straw is really not, it's not gonna do anything. It's not
It's-
gonna continue to give the strawberries anything they need.
yeah, it'll, if anything, it's, helping with moisture retention just by less like sun evaporation out of the soil.
Oh,
So it covers it there and it'll help reduce weeds. So it's not for nothing. And if it works for you and your dogs,
better to do the straw.
yeah, then nothing.
Yeah, okay. And the mulch is, comes in bags, the ones that you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
What is it again?
Compost, your purely rich
Oh.
purely,
Yeah, I don't know if I should do that. Unless we intend to just keep that gate on all summer, which is not really very pretty.
another thought is, we recommend 2 inches of mulching. You could do like an inch of that compost and then an inch of your.
Straw with a chop.
Yeah, if the straw helps
Oh.
keep the dogs out.
Yeah, I'm thinking, yes, I don't think they would wanna go in there, we go.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I don't think so.
we also sell things like deer deterrent. That smells garlicky and clovey and tiny, that's just smells uninteresting. That might be something you could use in
I have a
addition.
dog that likes everything to eat. She's a puppy. We have two dogs. It's the puppy that's in there, I think, but you might be able to just tell her no.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's interesting. All right, this is very helpful.
You're welcome.
We'll see what comes up. It may be too old. They may
Yeah.
be too old. I don't really know. It's from a friend who moved out of a house and she's like, I have strawberry plants, but I should ask her how long she had them she had them in pots. She has a green thumb. Everything grows for her. She had strawberries and I don't really know how long they've been there, so.
Yeah,
I never knew they had a lifespan.
yeah, see how they look this year? You can always
Yeah.
take a picture of them, bring them in,
I don't
or,
even know what they are.
yeah.
When they start growing, maybe I will take a
If
picture.
you,
and
if you can
show
get a
you.
berry off of them too,
Yeah,
Darren here, he might be able to tell you what kind of strawberry.
yeah, okay, yeah, well, it's kind of a crapshoot, but it's a very warm spot. I think the warmest spot and it's up against the house. Gets a lot of sun right there. So we'll see what happens. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, guys, I see I have questions on here. Sorry about that. Let me get to you here. If planting in containers, how much room do they need? Say for 3 plants, how large of a container? So they really want that like at least 12 inches of space. So if you're doing 3 plants, you're gonna have them be 12 inches away from each other. So at least like a 3 square foot area. If that makes sense. They need that 12 inches of space, probably from each other as well as from the edge of the pot. When I'm doing my container planting of my strawberries, I do 1 strawberry in 1 pot. Pretty good sized pot. How deep should the pots be for strawberry roots? So they really only use the top 3 inches, but they're gonna want at least 6 to 8 inches deep. If that makes sense. They might have a taproot that reaches down there, and they love the space. But 6 inches is about as little of depth as you can get away with. And I think that's all the questions there. Let me double check. I appreciate you guys for your questions and for being here. Thank you very much. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to email me.